can you share, or do you know why that game was canceled by Microsoft? When again, like you'd think for launch they'd want to have this out there. Is it just I mean, I know every company, even Microsoft, has budgets. You know, because they were funding Dead Rising 3 at that point. They had Rise going on, plus their first-party stuff like Forza 5. Was it just hey, we're not quite sure about this thing yet, so we only have so much money, so let's pick this? But I guess help me understand why Microsoft can.
Ultimately, I can't tell you. I think that often it comes down to budget, right? It comes down to budget, and it comes down to having a champion, right? Because I can see games that had champions and weren't canceled until $80 million were spent. I can see there's games that had a $10 million budget and had a champion and ended up the budget was $60 million and it shipped. And so in the end, I think the challenge is there has to be someone, when you're talking about big budget stuff, there has to be someone at the publisher or Sony or Microsoft, I guess they're publishers too, but is that if that champion isn't there, and there's not the person to just say, look, no, it's going to be good, and yeah, it's not where it is right now, and yes, we're maybe going to spend another $20 million on it, and it's going to sound horrible, and you know what, everybody just suck it. I mean, not of course that should ever be said that way, but there has to be someone with that attitude and the ability to defend the game. I'll even go back all the way back to Baldur's Gate, so the position I was in. Baldur's Gate was, we all thought it was awesome, right? And it's doing really well. And the sales forecast came back from Europe. And sales forecasts are attached to how much it's going to be marketed in PR. So the sales forecast from our European office came back 0. They weren't going to sell it. D&D is meaningless now. We don't believe in RPGs. And so and that actually then impacted how the American sales force was thinking about it. And so I think Baldur's Gate would have been successful anyway, but no matter, I think, for a game to truly be big, it often has to be pushed, and it has to have ads and PR and all this other kind of stuff. And I remember I went to Brian, I said, Brian, because he's busy and Interplay was going public and there's just all this kind of stuff, and I just grabbed his time and I said, you have to help me push this game. We're gonna have there's gonna be a huge sales meeting in a couple weeks. This is where Interplay would bring in all the sales reps like Best Buy and all this kind of stuff and do a weekend. Please get up in front of everybody and say this is going to be amazing. You need to sell. They're not listening to me. And so he did. He went up there and he sold it. And the sales forecasts went up. And it got more PR and it got more marketing dollars. And again, BG would have been successful anyway, but and sounds like I'm maybe patting myself on the back, but I'm just using it as an example of that's when you don't have that. So ultimately the answer to your question, why did Stormlands get canceled? Stormlands got canceled because we didn't have an advocate.
So that brand new executive producer didn't have Phil Spencer's ear, who was running studios at the time, to really fight for the game.
That is my best guess. Is that and it just
Did fatalities, was that sort of the next natural step?
No, fatalities didn't come until later. When I played a lot of Street Fighter, and one of the things about Street Fighter that annoyed me and I loved was when you get the other guy dizzy. You just beat the crap out of them, and then they're dizzy. And when you're the guy who's dizzy, you're just oh God, now you get to hit me again, like that. And that was such a bad feeling, and it was such a good feeling when you're the guy who's attacking them. And so I was really kind of feeling, I want to have that good feeling, but I don't want to give the other guy the bad feeling. So we moved the dizzy to the end of the fight when you lost. So you're dizzy, and then we just give the guy, okay, now here's your chance.
Finish him.
And usually people would just do an uppercut, and that would feel better.
Yeah.
And then that kind of evolved to, what if you could do something special at the end? And then kind of the rest is history.
Do you remember which fatality came first? What was the first one?
I think the Kano tearing the guy's heart out. It's so cliche martial arts movie type of thing, because we would say, you could show your heart before you die.
Right.
That was a big, some myth in some kung fu movie.
I've got to ask you about your pooping in space story that you told in the book, because it's just I don't think any of us really think about that, but it turns out it's a whole ordeal, and also that the forces on your body are such that you don't need to go as often, but when you do, it's
You
time.
really got to go a lot. Yeah, well, what's funny is there's actually books you can go buy on the internet. There's a book called How to Go to the Bathroom in Space, and other stories. And the story that almost every astronaut tells about going to space is they tell the story of the way you were trained to go to the bathroom in space. No one, other than myself, to my knowledge, tells the actual story of how troubling it is to go to the bathroom in space. The simple version of it, first with the training version, and if you read How to Go to the Bathroom in Space book, this is what it will say. The toilet is sort of like a small telephone booth. It has a receptacle for solid waste. It has a receptacle for liquid waste. A bunch of switches and knobs that I'll ignore for now, but it's actually fairly complicated to turn it on and off for reasons of zero gravity. But basically, it's a funnel you pee into for liquid waste,
Sure.
which works fine, and that's easy. But the solid waste receptacle is the problem. And it's basically a beer keg bolted to the floor with a shoebox size toilet seat with a lid and a receptacle about the size of your water bottle that fits down inside of it with a plastic bag with a rubber band that holds it at the top. The plastic bag goes down into the shoebox and has perforations in the bottom, and the same vacuum hose you could have peed into is attached to the bottom of it. So in theory, if I were to release M&Ms, for example, above this, airflow would pull those M&Ms into the plastic bag.
Okay.
Then you could release the top of the plastic bag. It would be sealed by the rubber band. It would fall into the beer keg, and you'd put a new plastic bag for the next user. That's how you go to the bathroom in space.
Okay.
So that's the official way. The problem is, first, you haven't gone to the bathroom in a long time because your GI tract slows down when you're in space because gravity's not helping it. You're not walking around in ways that help it. So when you finally do need to go, you've got 5 or 6 days of backup.
Yeah, you're backed up.
And when you begin to use, situate over this plastic bag, a column of, I like to use toothpaste as the metaphor. You imagine toothpaste squeezing out of a tube.
Yeah, it's easy to picture.
But if you think on Earth, if I were to squeeze toothpaste out of a tube over my sink, gravity would bend it down toward the sink, and eventually, after 10 grams or so was out, gravity would pull
Break
that
it
off,
off.
break it off, and fall in. But if you do that in zero gravity, it'll just stay there, right? And so, without gravity, if I try to move the toothpaste tube away from the toothpaste comes with it. And so when you sit over this container and you begin to go to the bathroom, you quickly create a column to the bottom of the bag. And if you try to continue, it just sort of spreads out on your backside. And you're going like, that's not comfortable, and it's probably going to make a mess, so what do I do? And everybody sort of figures out the next move, which is kind of give a bounce, because that tends to break things, like shaking the toothpaste off the tube. But now you have an obstruction in the bag.
Oh, no.
And so you start again, but now you have the same problem happening, but even sooner, half as long. And you're going, well, now what do you do? And the only other things other than you in this room are baby wipes, which is your equivalent of toilet paper,
Yeah.
rubber gloves in case you needed it, and the more of those plastic bags for installing for the next user. And you realize that you could clean up, discard that bag, and do this process over and over again, but that would take dozens of bags and use up the supply on the space station. And so instead, everybody figures it out. You put on the rubber glove, get out some wet wipes, and you sort of manually manipulate things out of the way to continue, and then you kind of repeat this process. And it takes you like 45 minutes. And so by the time I got out, I'm sweating.
It's a whole production.
I've used all the stuff, and the other crewmer's like, I guess you figured it out. And it's really hilarious that, one, no one ever talks about it. Two, no one's made a better toilet. After years and years and millions of dollars being spent on toilets, I could go through the pantheon of toilets that have been invented for space, and they're all worse than the one I just described. That's still the best toilet. In fact, the newest toilet up there is a new American toilet, but what they did is bought a Russian toilet and added water recycling to it, urine recycling to it. But otherwise, it's a Russian toilet. It's still the state of the art.
So you're probably happy to only have to go every few or several days.
Yeah, so I think I made 3 solid waste deposits, and that was enough.
The things we don't think about in space. Yeah. Fable: The Journey, which I reviewed it for us. For me, it was fun when Kinect physically allowed it to work, which was about half the time in my recollection. Did you guys volunteer for that project, or did Microsoft come to you and say, We could use some Kinect games. Can you help us out?
I find it hard to remember the exact sequence of.
Yeah.
Because you got to remember there was Kinect came, there was a Milo thing.
I'm gonna ask you about that in a minute.
And then there was Fable: The Journey, and it's kind of a little confused in my mind about the order of when these things happened, but Kinect. I'll be honest, it was a disaster. It was a disaster, Ryan. It was a train wreck. It started as this device which kind of could do everything itself.
Yeah.
It didn't take up any processor power. The field of view was could encompass the whole room.
Right.
The audio on it, which no one really talks about, was originally supposed to be multi-sensing. It could sense where you were as you walked across the road.
Yeah.
It ended up being none of those things. It ended up being a device which was, you had to sit in a very small arc to get it. And as you said, its promise, the promise of when Kudo walked out on stage and went like that was so enormous. In fact, it reminds me a little bit of VR at the moment. Is the promise is so big.
Yeah.
You don't have to say anything. You just think, oh my God, my console can see me.
Right.
That's the promise. But the actual delivery of that promise fell so far short.
Be honest, did it piss you off that Guitar Hero 3 was built on the back of what you'd made, was the one that took off, and you guys had made this thing, and now it was just sold, and sort of the momentum that you'd started wasn't, you weren't sort of reaping the benefits of that?
Well, I wouldn't say we were angry about it. It was emotionally complicated because we were attached to the Guitar Hero brand. Like we had poured our hearts and souls into crafting that brand identity, and we loved it. And so then seeing it, so for it to become our arch nemesis in the marketplace with versus our new brand was just tough for us, because on the one hand, Rock Band, it's our thing now. Like we want to be victorious with our new brand, right? But the flip side, it's like we didn't exactly want to beat Guitar Hero. We loved Guitar Hero, right? And so to some degree, we were happy to see both of them thriving and evolving in their own different directions and whatnot. But like business is business and competition is hard, and so
you actually got to work with Nintendo. Mario teaches typing.
Yeah. So I got a funny story with that one. So at the time, Mavis Beacon teaches typing was the big hit.
Big one.
Right, and I knew Les Crane was Software Toolworks, and so I had seen somewhere that like over half the people were buying it to teach their kid how to type. So I thought, well, God, a teacher, what's more interesting than a teacher but Mario, right? So I went to Nintendo and I pitched them and they loved it. So we put Mario Brothers out, and it's a huge success. Right, and then he got so angry with me. I actually went to his show, and he was giving me like this stink eye, And my wife goes, well, that guy really doesn't like you, And I go, well, oh my gosh, So I call him up, and I'm like, did I do something? He goes, no. I said, really? No. He goes, no. I said, well, get this in the tone of your voice, He goes, well, yeah. And I go, well, you're competing with me. I said, oh, come on, you're competing with other people, right? Anyway, he was so mad at me. Anyway, we made up for it later, but it's kind of funny.
Because I feel like Nintendo they don't really do that stuff anymore. I guess they were.
Well, actually, we did Mario Teaches Typing, then we did Mario's Game Gallery. Miyamoto, he liked what we were doing, right? And so everybody was happy, and then somebody else came out with some other Mario product that was not high quality. And so they came back and said, no more with Mario. And we said, yeah, but you like us. He said, Brian, we do, but he says, no more. That's
Somebody
it.
else ruined it. They ruined it.
Yeah.
The gravy train comes to an end.
I know. That was a big success for us, Mario Teaches Typing.
I've told you this before. I'm not saying this for the cameras. I really think Deus Ex is a top 5 game of all time. It is for me, certainly, and it's my memories of it, and it was such an experience. Do you agree that it's Hall of Fame caliber, that it's one of the greatest ever?
All I will say is that it is
one of the games I'm most proud of. And I'm most proud of it because it demonstrably influenced other developers. With that, I'm really not going to name names here, but I've had several developers come to me and say they redesigned the game they were working on when Deus Ex came out because of having played it.
Because they would have been embarrassed had they shipped after you.
or they, I had others tell me that they changed the way they thought about their own work after that, and their games ever after were different because of it. So it really did have some influence, and that's not me bragging, it's just a fact. Yeah. So there's that, and also how many games in the history of video gaming still matter 17 years after they came out,
It's not a long list, really.
It really isn't, and so I'm humbled by that, but it also says that we did something special. I mean, I had a very special team on that project, and we did something special together, and so I have to acknowledge that, or I'd be a total hypocrite.
When those developers that you're very politely not naming, is it that when those developers come to you, is that the highest form of flattery, I guess? Is that the best feeling after a Deus Ex versus the sales or critical acclaim?
I could care less about sales. I don't care much about reviews. I don't read reviews. My wife and my mother read the reviews and interviews and all that stuff and tell me when someone gives me a hard time. So no, those are not very important. Influence is very important to me. I'm now old enough that the word legacy means something to me. My wife hates when I say that because it sounds like I'm an egomaniac, but leaving something behind is very important to me. The most important thing is what I heard and still hear from players. The whole idea of Deus Ex was to recreate the feeling of playing Dungeons and Dragons and telling stories with your friends. Not being told a story, but telling stories with your friends and with a dungeon master. Yeah. And so in Deus Ex, what we were trying to do was lay out the skeleton of a story. Here's why what you're doing is important. And then let players own the minute to minute. And have every player finish the game having had a unique experience. And I heard from a lot of players. And so I know we succeeded at that. Players had unique experiences, and they did things that we didn't know could be done in the game that we made.
There's so many reasons that games click or don't click. Yeah. Timing can be one of them.
I think timing helped. Actually, timing was against us.
Well, I mean, I want to talk about timing with Battleborn too, which we'll get to that. I think there's I don't want to judge it, but I think there's at least a coin flip's chance that maybe it wouldn't have made it. It wouldn't have resonated with people.
It's easy to argue that.
It's
easy to argue that.
But one game that did.
I got to tell you though, one of the most frustrating things, because the other thing I knew when I said let's go for it was, this will help. This will fix the dissonance, but I know it's putting a ceiling on us. I knew it was putting a ceiling on us because there's, especially back then, there's just a huge percentage of the gaming audience that does not want a cartoon.
I remember,
they just don't want a cartoon. Yep. And I'll tell you that one of the most excruciating things for me.
You had the last laugh on that one.
Well, kind of. The ceiling's still there. We're just pushing it.
Borderlands 2 sold pretty damn well.
Yes, it did. Still against the ceiling on it. Like, let me tell you the evidence.
Pretty healthy ceiling.
Yeah, I'm not sad. I'm not sad. But like, when you swing for the fences, you want to think like, how do I, look, our mission is to entertain the world, so we are dismal failures. Borderlands is a horrific failure if your goal is to entertain the world. There are 7 billion people in the world. What's 25 million, 30 million units? That sucks, right? Like, it's a horrible failure. The solution for the next Duke game isn't just about story. There's a million, like, we can all dream up a story, and I think that's clever, and it's kind of, playing with that is going to be necessity, I think, in any Duke game that has story be a part of it. But here's the true answer. There has to be something from a design point of view first. And Duke 3D worked not only because of the character. The reason why we all loved the game was because of the gameplay and some of the innovations that were in the gameplay.
Unprecedented interactivity with the world.
That's part of it. Now, those innovations no longer are innovations. So you cannot trade on that today. Duke forever tried. and it demonstrated what the result is. It was fun, but it won't move the world. So we're going to need a new design paradigm, something that we haven't seen before, but something that when you imagine it fully realized as a design premise and you think, okay, what's the context that should be applied to this? Because let me back up. A video game is either story, it's not either, it's all of story, style, and design. Where story is the premise, it's the characters, who, what, why, where, and when. Style is the look and the feel, it's the art direction, it's the audio direction, it's how it reads basically is it's style. And then design is the gameplay. That's the camera, that's the control, that's the input, that's the feedback. And it's the genre, it's all of that. And you start with one point. Now, most people, I've heard pitches from, like, I can't even count the number of developers I've heard pitches from for Duke, and we've gone through it a million times inside of Gearbox. They always tend to start on story, but I think that's not the place to start. You need to start with design, because the correct Duke Nukem game that's going to succeed in the marketplace is actually bringing something new there. That's what made Duke 3D a success. That's what helped Duke 3D become on the map. The story, the character, the story, and the style followed the design. So imagine now a game design that's bringing something new to the table, that when you think about the context now that you want to add to this design, you think, oh, it would be perfect if only we could have Duke Nukem. That would be like, whatever that design is, where that's the thing that comes next, then it's going to work. And that's what we're hunting for.
We were working on Bioshock 2, and I remembered, well, during my interview at 2K Marin, one of the interview pieces was like, pitch a level for Bioshock that could have taken place, I forget, like between Fort Frolic and the next level, I guess that would be Hephaestus, the mechanical area. So like, pitch a level that could be slotted into Bioshock, and what would it be, and who would the character be, kind of your antagonist character, and what would the story be? So I had pitched the computer core of Rapture as a thing with like a guy who was kind of splicing to become smarter and see all the possibilities with math and stuff. So that was my kind of like, this would be a cool idea pitch during my interview. And so I think that was kicking around, where I was like, well, if we want to make some DLC, what part of Rapture could we make? I had an idea for that. I remember this. And then I remember when I was in the design pit, when we were working on the main game, JP LeBreton, who was the lead level designer, he was just kind of telling a story about how he and the lead designer of Bioshock 1 had been kind of just, can I swear on this?
Yeah, say whatever you want. Unfiltered.
Okay, yeah, that's true.
Randy Pitchford was in here, and dude was like a sailor. It was great.
Unchained. So they were bullshitting and saying like, wouldn't it be cool if, with Rapture's advanced technology, if they had like created the original AI that sort of in the unspoken fan fiction had like led to the technology that ended up being like Shodan and System Shock 2. Like, wouldn't that be a cool idea or whatever? And so those two ideas, when the concept of, hey, we need to do story DLC after the main game came together, I was like, we should do the computer core of Rapture, and it can be about this kind of like steampunk AI that's created, and kind of draw from those System Shock 2 ideas of like, spoilers, Shodan being able to like impersonate other people and kind of have multiple identities. And so, kind of like, I guess the last thing that I threw out there, I was fortunate enough to be given the opportunity to lead the DLC by Zach McClendon, who was the lead designer of Bioshock 2. I think mostly because I had been a dedicated level designer and like done my work on the main game, but also I was one of, I think, the few people who was sort of like, hey, we're done with the main game. Well, I've got some ideas for DLC. Like, here's some, like, I think we could do this. I think that would be cool.
Again, going out there and getting it, right? You didn't just sit back and be like, okay, well, I'll wait to be told what to do next.
Yeah, it was more like, hey, if we're doing story DLC, here's some ideas. I'd like to hear your feedback on them or whatever. And I think it was just sort of one of those things where it's like, you want to do DLC, right? We need somebody to do it. Yeah, go for it.
Cuphead and Mugman came from the tail end of the concept phase, where we were like, none of these that we have work.
Yeah.
So then I'm like, not burned out, but just like there's no more ideas left. So I'd be watching old cartoons and just instead of looking at what they had on the characters, just looking in the background or
Interesting.
anything. Like, there's a palm tree in the background. Okay, here's a palm tree head character.
Yeah.
And there's, and it just, we went into like everything.
It was like
Hammers.
a decision, I don't remember why, at what time, that was like none of the classic formula of characters are standing out. Now, some of them would have been good and we could have made a game with them, but I don't remember exactly the moment, but it was something that's like, let's explore and get weird, like go into...
I think it was just, I had all these normal designs.
Yeah.
And for a laugh, I threw in something like an anvil for a head. And then you would be like,
But you always do that too.
This is the only anvil one that like looks cool out of this whole bunch. So I'm like, well, I'll go with that really odd idea and then just keep going. Like at the same time, researching cartoons, getting inspiration from that, but...
And like I still find I think it's Disney rule, don't quote me on that, but like the characters are only as strong as the silhouette. So like you can put as many like little bells and whistles on something, but if the silhouette doesn't stand out, then your character doesn't have like that much to it. Like it will not be subconsciously recognizable simply. And I remember the moment you randomly just had like drawn him and you're like, check out these like next 80 pictures of stuff. And he was like a lot skinnier and spindlier in like small kind of briefs, but he had the cup for a head and the straw in it. Yeah. And like, it just instantly felt like there's something right there that's going to work out.
Don't you find it a little weird that he drinks his own like brain fluid basically to power up?
Weird in the best 30s way, right?
Yes.
That's
no, it's not a complaint or a criticism. It's just I chuckled at that the first time I saw it.
No, we really enjoyed that idea too. Just every idea runs by the like, let's push it to as crazy as it can be, but make sure it's authentic.
Class-based multiplayer abilities, all that stuff that's very normal now.
Yeah.
Even the cross-play.
Yep.
Did you guys volunteer for that, or did the Microsoft overlords go,
no, that was me.
We got this initiative, we need you to do it?
Yeah, what happened there, honestly, is that development was rocky. But that was internal. External, what my bosses were looking for was a big PC game. They wanted to show their commitment to PC.
Right.
But we had been developing it for Xbox, and all of our decision making was Xbox related, controller related.
Sure.
And the controls were just great at the time.
Yeah, great.
It was a great design team. They were killer at their jobs. In terms of how to make something feel right. And so my bosses, met with me. They're like, "Hey, we'd like you to make this a PC game instead." And
instead. So just we won't even bother with this on Xbox. We want it as a PC game to show that we're serious about PC gaming.
So that was their agenda. My agenda was no. I'm trying to make a hit game on Xbox. This is the studio's geared up, and I have everybody like revving on. Yeah, we're going to make a hit on Xbox, and it's like we'd like you to make a PC game. But in retrospect, especially after having lunch with Phil Spencer, and he told me, "Wait, how did this go?" Because at the time, he wasn't the one delivering the message; it was someone else. And
Ed Freeze was.
No, this is after Ed. This is Shane Kim.
That's Shane Kim days, yes.
Yeah, and so the way Shane said it was, we want to show our commitment to PC, and we want to put this out on PC. Phil's point of view on it was, we've got Halo on Xbox. We need something of that caliber and that level on PC, right? Which is a different story.
Sure.
That maybe I could have gotten my head around, but I didn't. And then Robbie Bach, who was the president of
head of the whole shebang,
entertainment and stuff, he wrote this really great memo around the same time, talking about the future of connected entertainment. And there were no action items in it. There was no like call to action. He's just like, this is the future I see. And he was talking about what we're seeing now with mobile and Xbox, PC, or console and PC, and the whole connected world. He was writing about this. Yeah, he was totally right. Yeah, he's a great guy.
Yeah, he was in here.
Oh, that's right, he was. Yeah, I ran into him a while back at a con. It's like, didn't you used to work for me? I'm like, yeah. And he's like, oh, that was you. Anyway, so he wrote this fantastic memo, this visionary memo, that didn't get a lot of traction, I felt at the time, but I was inspired by it. And I thought, hey, wait a minute, what if I gave my bosses what they were looking for, a PC game, but we cross-platform, and to show what connectivity is and how Microsoft's leading the way.
Right.
And I wrote my own big memo, and I wanted it to be DirectX 10 at the time, exclusive and so, business.
Yeah.
Which has nothing to do with game development, by the way. It has something to do with making a great game. But that's how that came to pass, was connecting the dots. And then I realized, oh, this is a way to really get the game elevated in Microsoft and get lots of marketing dollars behind it. It was all that kind of thing.
Sure.
But it had nothing to do with the fans. It had nothing to do with them or what they wanted or what they expected. It's the single biggest learning of my entire career.